Ladies, gentlemen, and survivors of the global pestilence, welcome to the Human Energy Field 2021, where we are very much alive and rolling dice. I'm glad to see you're still with us, Jamie. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. Survived the Christmas and New Year period, and here we are, as you say, in 2021. 2020's behind us, and there's more of it to come.
Oh God, yeah. Well,
I'm
I'm pessimistic about the future. Yeah. It was a bit of a delay getting around to getting back on this. We are recording this right at the end of January. We're both dealing with some stuff elsewhere, gathering our strength, and I urge our listeners to do the same. Put yourself first, be good to yourself, and give yourself some time, however you need to do it. And wear your mask over your nose as well. I would like to say, before we get started onto any topics, I want to give a quick apology for the previous episodes. If you have listened, thank you very much for listening. The music that we featured at the end of those episodes was snatched away from us cruelly by Spotify's copyright laws. I'm absolutely certain there's a way around that, and there's a way to get them up onto the back ends of the episodes. So I'm going to be trying to do that from now on, because I listened to other podcasts that do it. I know it can be done. We just didn't take the right channels. That's something that we're figuring out as we go along. This is all just winging the whole thing, aren't we, mate? Really, just making it up as we go along.
But with a new year comes some new sounds. So we've done a bit of a mini tech upgrade. So hopefully we'll sound a little bit better in this episode and the upcoming episodes as we did the first few. So.
Yeah, lovely. That's what we want. We want to be able to reach the masses in the most high quality way possible. So if there is a song at the end of this episode, then you'll know that I succeeded in trying to get that to work. And if there's no music, then we're working on it still. The album review that I'll be doing will come right at the end. But before that, let's get to the bulk of the episode now. We want to talk about RPGs and books, don't we? Do you want to start, man? Let's kick us off. What have you got for us?
All right, okay. I've got a few little offerings. The first thing that I've picked up isn't brand new, but it's the first time I've had a real dive into it. It's a source book called Predation. It is for the Cypher system, which is written by Monty Cook. Same guy who designed Numenera and The Strange, etc., and other games. This source book came out in 2017, so it's a couple of years old now. But it's a campaign setting for the Cypher system. So for those not familiar with the Cypher system, it is Monty Cook's generic role-playing rule set, which can be obviously used for all sorts, superheroes, horror, fantasy, whatever. But it encourages the mixing of genres to create interesting campaign settings. And the best way I can describe Predation is future time travelers go back to live with dinosaurs.
Oh, cool. Cool. Okay, so the people from the future going back.
Yeah, so it's got
Awesome.
all that future. So think kind of, I don't know if anyone's seen, there's a cheesy little show called Terra Nova, or maybe like Primeval, or Jurassic Parky, or that kind of stuff. But it's a nice little mix. It's a fun campaign setting. It's not super hard science fiction. It's got dinosaurs in it. It's great. So it's a fun, interesting campaign. It's the kind of thing you don't see very often. It's the kind of idea that maybe is kind of developed very thin on the ground by like kind of OSR. Kind of designers and writers. That's great, let's put some dinosaurs in there, and then they throw in some dinosaur stats and it's done. Whereas at least to this, they've gone into geography and climate and flora and fauna and dealt with what kind of religion do these time travelers have, and all of this kind of stuff. So reading through it, there's some nice references to the science that they've gone and researched. So they've got experts on dinosaurs and fossils and all this kind of time periods to kind of give the campaign setting a slightly more realistic feel rather than a fantasy feel. But it's a good quality book. Monty Cook's physical products are always lovely. As you will know, I'm a big fan of a physical RPG as opposed to a PDF or whatever. I think it's nice to hold something nice in your hand. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
and it's hardback, full glossy pages, great artwork, great writing. And even though Predation is an unusual campaign setting, I'm using it as a springboard to recommend the Cypher system to anyone who is out there with the kind of GMs, we'll know them. I think, we are maybe those kind of GMs as well. You've got a lot of ideas swimming around your head, and, you want to run loads of different styles of games and types of games. But you don't want to learn a new system every week or every month. And sometimes the best thing for that to learn a generic system, whether that be GURPS or Fate or, whatever. And I think the Cypher system is one of those systems which really lends itself well to genre hopping and genre mixing. It's got a really interesting, I'm not going to get too much into the Cypher mechanics, but it's got this really interesting thing where the players make all the dice rolls. So the GM makes no dice rolls, which I just think is great. So all of the chance and the luck and all of that is in the player's hands, not in the GM's hands. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at things. But I mean, you can't expect anything apart from good game design from a name like Monty Cook, really.
Yeah, Monty Cook. Every time I see his name on something, I tend to kind of flock towards it. And my style of GMing anyway is that I try and keep my hands off the dice as much as possible, no matter what game I'm playing. I try and defer those challenges to the players whenever I can. So my experience with the Cypher system has been one of elation in a way. The fact that someone has given me permission as the games master to not have to roll dice. The pressure is off me officially, if you like, instead of me having to hack D&D 5 so that I don't have to roll anything. So yeah, that's definitely something that I appreciate about the Cypher system for sure.
Well, I mean, what's good about the settings, especially Numenera, which was obviously the kind of pilot, the kind of front runner of the Cypher system before the generic rulebook came out, and it works really well for the background of Numenera. And likewise, I think when Monty Cook has brought people in to design campaign settings that utilize the Cypher system, they have designed those campaign systems with the mechanics in mind, so they feel an integral part of the campaign book. So, for instance, Predation it is written in a way it's not written like a D&D source book that's been bolted onto a Cypher system. It feels like a Cypher system campaign setting because the mechanics that Monty Cook has designed run through the book, and I think that's what's really great about the way that he's designed the source books. And there hasn't been a lot of campaign settings for the Cypher system. I feel it's one of those things that kind of went under the radar a little bit. I mean, a lot of people probably picked up Numenera, a few people looked at the Strange or whatever, but I think the generic Cypher system and the very few campaign setting books that came out kind of been overlooked a little bit, and I think it's a shame because I rate the Cypher system probably as one of the better mechanical systems to have come out in the last kind of 10 years, really.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised at your championing of the Cypher system, because I know, well, you've got a reputation for being a bit of a grognard, shall we say. So I remember when we first started talking about Numenera and you actually said that you enjoyed it, I was quite surprised to hear that it's a modern thing that you're embracing,
Yeah, absolutely, and you're absolutely right. I do tend to gravitate towards the old things. It's a mix of nostalgia, but it's also a mix of the idea that I think I like getting into these ideas when they were done fresh rather than just being revisited 100 times. But it's nice for me also to champion something that is, well, I'm calling it new. I know it's not kind of brand new off the press, but it's a new game in terms of the hobby. So yeah, I can really recommend the Cypher system to anyone who hasn't looked into it and enjoys relatively rules light, genre bending RPGs. Can do a lot worse than look at them. And they're beautiful books. They're great on the shelf. You get a lot of bang for your buck if you can pick the core book up. I don't know if it's in print now, actually. At the time of us recording, I'm not sure. So maybe the second-hand prices on those are going a little bit up, which wouldn't surprise me because I can see the Cypher system books being the kind of thing that people don't really let go of because they're very useful. I can use this for all sorts of different games in the future, and so it's not the kind of books you would dump because they're lovely.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Numenera books specifically have been a little bit of an obstacle in me embracing that system more fully. The core book, especially the second edition Numenera, it came with the two core books together. You remember that?
Yeah.
That was really expensive, man. That was always been on my list of books that I want to get a hold of. But every time I go to try and get it, it's like £50 new or something. I can't justify spending that much on two core books. So I never got around to picking it up.
It's interesting that you mentioned price, and I really want to come back to price in RPGs after we've discussed a few others, because it's a conversation I've had recently about price points. So I definitely want to come back to that. But what I can say is that your value for money when you're paying 30, 40, 50 pound maybe for a hardback book. These Monty Cook books are well bound. They're well published. They're really good. But as far as Numenera, I was running the game store at the time it came out, so I got in at ground level. So I got the first ed and a bunch of first ed source books and really got into it. So when the second ed rolled around, I didn't bother with it because I just felt I didn't need it. I didn't need an upgrade on it. I can understand people want to tweak their systems and bring out a kind of revised version, and also want to sell books. But to me, the second edition was something that I saw, and I just thought, I don't need that. I think the first edition was great for me. So, but yeah, it's expensive. A lot of new books are now, though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I mean, it's a one-off thing for an infinite amount of time you could spend with any RPG, which is the appeal to me, really.
Yeah, 100%. And like I say, we can really get into the price points and values and comparisons against other pieces of leisure time, which I think we've talked about before, and I'm sure we will again. But if the game is good and you can get a lot of hours of playtime out of it, then the cost involved can start to look a little bit better, maybe. But as an initial price point, it's pretty high. But I mean, God, look at how expensive it is to play 5th ed D&D nowadays if you want to play it properly, in brackets.
Well, I do need that £300 carbon fibre beholder hanging from my ceiling in order to play.
Dude, I mean, all the jokes aside, even the 3 core books is going to set you back £100. And I mean, we have to talk about it at retail. I know people can pick it up cheaper in sales and eBay and stuff like that. But I mean, to go into a big bookstore or a game store and get into D&D at ground level is expensive, man. It's 3 digits, easy, so it's not a cheap game.
Yeah, very true. I remember with 5e and Apocalypse World back in the day, when I was first picking up them, I didn't have the money for it, so I just torrented the books and then printed them off at my old work printer, and then
as you do,
yeah. I got this little black and white folder. It's still around here somewhere because it's got my character notes in it, but. So quickly, tell me a bit more about Predation, the setting, because that sounded pretty cool. What sort of future are you time traveling from, and why are you going back to prehistory? Tell me a bit about that.
Okay, so I don't want to give too much away for people who want to get into it, and I think it's the kind of campaign setting where there are a lot of little hidden campaign setting spoilers hidden in there, which is mysteries that the players can get into as the game progresses.
Right, okay. Or not?
Yeah. I feel I was struggling to kind of lay the setting for it without big spoilers, but I think it's one of those that I would want to sit around a table and I would want to explore the setting through the kind of players' experience, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Right. So very narrative heavy then.
Yeah, maybe I'm making it more mysterious than it needs to be, but I just think it's one of those that it's such an unusual setting. I don't want to kind of lay bare the kind of the nuts and bolts behind it. I don't want to pull back the curtain on it too quickly for people who might want to get into it.
Well, now I really want to have a look at it. Let me see the cover. Hold the cover up. Cool.
It's a great book. Like I say, great artwork throughout and everything. So what I can say about the setting is the geographical setting is large enough to accommodate different styles of play. There are cities, so the people who have come from the future have been around already in the past for about 100 years. So a society has evolved, so to speak. It's still a relatively new society, and obviously there's a lot of holdovers from the previous super high-tech society that has travelled backwards. And it's about the juxtaposition between this very primeval land and this super high-tech future world, which I think makes it really interesting. But what I do like is there's a lot of focus on societies that have kind of developed and sprung up in inside society and kind of the way that they deal with day-to-day life and trade, and the way that they use and potentially abuse the ecosystem that they're sharing with. It's just a nice little snapshot into kind of very 65 million years ago, before the asteroid strike, and the world looks very different. It's fantastical in itself, but then to turn that into a sci-fi game, with gadgets and guns and cyberware and all that sort of stuff, it's a really fun mixture of stuff. So I can say that the setting is wide enough to accommodate, Guns and Glory style campaigns, or it could, do a little bit of political intrigue if that's the way you want to go. It reminds me a bit of a shiny cyberpunk updated version of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, for anyone who knows that really weird, obscure reference to I think it was Mark Schultz did the comic books, and GDW did a role-playing game using the Twilight 2000 system.
Wow, I don't know that one. No.
Yeah, it was based on a comic book.
Wow.
And it's basically, I'm not going to tell the whole story of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, but it's people and dinosaurs, basically. So obviously you can draw parallels directly from there. But Predation takes a really fresh look at it. People from the future in the past. Really bizarre, really good. And it's a single book, there's nothing else. I mean, it needs the Cypher System rulebook to play, but any GM worth his salt could take the Predation book and develop it to his own system, whatever he's using, GURPS, D&D, whatever. There's rules like people out there who want to just use it as a setting for Lamentations or bloody, whatever. That's fine. There's enough really interesting background there that it makes for an interesting campaign setting just as a read, even if you don't own Cypher System. I think you can still pick up Predation and get a lot from it. So that's why it's a hot pick for me, because I just think it's ideas I really hadn't seen before, and it was well written and well researched. And I think when you get all of these things put together with a really solid physical product, it's ticking boxes left, right, and centre.
Lovely. All right. It does sound like it draws some parallels with Numenera as well, in the terms of the whole kind of juxtaposition between times and societies kind of vibe. So
it's got that thumbprint. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, it sounds really interesting, man. That's a good one. I last year now in December, there was a virtual convention that Modifius put on, ModCon, and it was a point. I had some free time, and they were doing a weekend where they were running a lot of different games, and there was a lot of tickets available.
So I don't know how that works, man. Tell me from ground level. So how does a virtual con work? You buy a ticket for that, or you get a slot, or?
Right, well, I mean, this one, I think they're all different, to be honest, but this one in particular, I saw it advertised, and I thought, yeah, go on, I'll play some games. There's GM's advertising slots. So I visited the site, and the site is basically a big list of all the games that the GMs are running that they've put up, and you can go have a look through them, pick one that sounds good, if it's at a time that suits you, and if it's a system that you like, and then you go in to that game. Some of them are free, some of them have a buy-in, like a $5 buy-in or something like that. And you basically apply for a slot in the game the GM's running over the course of that weekend or that week that it might have been. There was a lot of good seminars and stuff as well. There's a great Games Master geezer who has his YouTube channel called How to Be a Good GM, I think it is, and his name's Guy something. I really like him. He's a good public speaker. He's got a lot of experience and knowledge. I think he's a pretty decent bloke. He was doing some seminars. That was pretty fun. I signed up for 3 games, and only one of them actually happened. So it's good to know that conventions in virtual world are a bit like the ones in real life. Where
what, as in like the GMs never turned up to run the game, or?
Yeah, the GMs emailed the players, i.e. me, saying this game is no longer happening. Sorry for the, maybe it was a personal thing, or maybe he didn't get enough players, or
yeah. So what were the 3 games you signed up to play then?
So the list of games available at this ModCon was D&D 5, D&D 5, D&D 5, D&D 5. Wow. Just honestly, I was just scrolling through 5th edition stuff, looking for anything else. I signed up to play a game of the Alien RPG, that new Alien RPG.
The Free League, yeah.
Yeah, it looked proper cool. A Star Trek adventure, That's the Modiphius 2d20 system, and Chronicles of Darkness game. The Alien game and the Star Trek game fell through, so I ended up playing in Chronicles of Darkness, which is a modern version of World of Darkness. Can you tell me the difference between World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness?
Not really. I mean, I'm an old school White Wolfer, so to me it's Old World of Darkness. I understand New World of Darkness. Whatever you want to call Chronicles of Darkness, I'm not sure. Is that? I don't know the terminology or the difference there. I'm not sure.
Right. It's something to do with it being New World of Darkness.
Right. Okay.
What fans, please write in and let us know what the hell the difference is between those. But so I ended up playing in this Chronicles of Darkness game with a great GM who's.
So what was it, Vampire, or is the game called Chronicles of Darkness?
It was a Mortals game, so I think it was just Chronicles of Darkness. I think.
Right. Okay.
It was like a Mortals horror kind of style game. And that was the first game I've played on Discord, audio only. So I was just had my earbuds in, playing with these American chaps. It was bizarre, but I actually did really enjoy it, man. I think he was quite a good GM, and he had his little story planned out and everything. And there was some funny moments in it. Yeah, it was quite good. Tell
me how it felt. I want to know more about playing audio and non-visual.
Well, the biggest obstacle for me was the GM and the two other players were all from the same part of California, so they all had a very similar accent. And there's me speaking like Harry Potter, Yeah. So, without looking at the usernames on the Discord server, I found it hard to know what player was talking and when the GM was talking. So that was an obstacle for me, but I think that's just a cultural thing, isn't it? Otherwise, it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, because I like sitting around a table or standing up and running a game in front of people. You can't beat that, can you?
Yeah. So I mean, isn't it strange that the rest of the guys in the group were from a similar kind of geographical location? Do you think that was happenstance, or do you think that was kind of do you think they'd all designed to play together already, or?
There was something about one other player dropped out and I got let in, and I think they were an existing group. It sounds like they knew each other. There was something else going on there.
Isn't that weird though, for that to be a con game, which is essentially a con game? You turn up at a table full of people who know each other, which I think. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a big fan of con games and whatever, but part of the con experience is to sit down at a table with a whole bunch of people that you don't know, you haven't met, and everyone's in the same boat. It kind of takes away from that, or it would for me if I sat down and everybody else at the table knew each other. I'd be like, oh, you know what I mean? Shit. Like, this is, but I mean, there's a lot of in-jokes that go on in games like that, and even the players are very welcoming. There's still a lot of that camaraderie. People understand each other a little bit better. People know how far to push the jokes and all that kind of stuff. And it can be really hard to sit at a table, virtual or not, with a bunch of people who are already playing with each other.
I agree, definitely. And when I have in the past ran games at conventions, I always try and make it a point of having people who don't know each other as part of the thing, because that is the appeal to me as well. You're right. So yeah, there was a bit of that factored into it. Certainly, I won't say that wasn't.
I know I know this is only your experience of this virtual con, but I mean, and this is no offense to Modiphius or anybody else who was involved in the organisation of this. I mean, but to me, it sounds like a washout. I'd be disappointed if I had kind of signed up to multiple games and 2 out of the 3 didn't go ahead, and a lot of the choice was D&D 5th. I mean, yeah, people can turn around and go, well, maybe you should just like D&D 5th. That's fine. But, if I don't, there are a lot of games that Modiphius are responsible for publishing, or have published. And I mean, obviously they don't publish D&D 5th. So I assume the idea was people could run anything. And maybe it's just indicative of the gaming industry at the minute that 99 out of 100 GMs want to run D&D 5th. I mean, I hope not. Otherwise, we are potentially in the worst state the RPG industry's ever been in. And it's bad enough already. I don't need to believe that 99 out of 100 groups are all playing D&D out there. Because there's other games out there, guys. There's other games out there.
Start with D&D. Let that be your gateway drug into bigger and better things. It's a great hobby. There's a lot of games out there. I actually went to the convention webpage because I thought I want to play a Modiphius game. I want to play Conan. I want to try out Star Trek. I want to try one of these 2D20 system games because the Dune role-playing game is coming out soon. I want to have a hand on this system. You know, that's the intent when I went over to find something to play.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, and I think it's a shame that didn't seem to come easy. And the game that you did play, it sounds like it was, you know, there was something else going on there. But I mean, if you had a good time, that's great, and the guys you played with were good, and that's good. So I mean, how long was the session?
It was like probably a 3-hour game.
All right, okay, so not mega long.
No, it's one of those games. I think the players longed it out a little bit. You know, you're trying to make decisions and whatever else. There's a bit of that going on.
Right.
But the GM was great. So shout out to Panopticon Gaming. I think he's on Instagram now. I think I convinced him to get an Instagram account. Really nice guy. He's a decent GM. So
good.
That was good, man. I made a friend. That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's what it's all about.
worth doing. Yeah. But I mean, obviously, just from a narrow perspective of that con, it didn't seem great. But I'm sure these things are beset with problems, and you can only rely on people so much, and it can be hard to do. But good for them for doing it anyway. Putting people together in virtual tables, it's good. We need more of that. So I support that completely.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you're right though in what you're saying. It wasn't the most rounded experience. But I don't know if I'd try it again next year. I think I'd just watch the seminar stuff because that was more interesting than the games. But it was all right. Okay, so what else have you got for us then, dude? What else is going on?
So another little random purchase that I've made over the Christmas period, as a wee treat to myself, was the Andrew McNeil's publishing copy of Neverland, which is a hardback D&D 5th ed campaign setting for Peter Pan, so Neverland, the land of Neverland. Obviously, I've just kind of said some dubious things about 5th ed D&D. So the fact that it's 5th ed D&D wasn't the thing that sold it to me. However, this product is beautiful. Again, not to harp on about the same thing, but it's a lovely presented book, great graphics, glossy pages. It's essentially a big hardback hex crawl. So for people who love, people who love that kind of Carcosa, Forbidden Island kind of old school OSR, hex crawl adventures. This is it, but with a background that but it's presented very intelligently. You've got the crocodile, you've got your pirates, you've got a whole bunch of interesting monsters. You've got the Lost Boys, you've got the Indians, all of this stuff, and it's really given a kind of a dark tone and change. Are you aware of Red and Pleasant Land for Lamentations?
Only by name alone.
Right, okay, so it takes that kind of Alice in Wonderland kind of vibe and turns it Lamentations. I mean, Neverland, if you put a Lamentations sticker on the back of this and change the inside rules to Lamentations rather than D&D 5th, it wouldn't look out of place.
Right.
It's really cool. It's really well done. I mean, it's maybe not as gonzo as some of the Lamentations stuff, but in that respect, I like it more, I think. It's the kind of setting that I can totally imagine running. Even I would probably maybe even dust off my D&D 5th ed books, which normally I only keep them on the shelf because of Trial by Dice, and if Dungeon Punks ever get around to doing another one, which I'm sure they will, so shout out to those guys. I only keep my D&D 5th books for that. But we
miss you, Dungeon Punks.
Yeah, we do. So we because D&D is so adaptable, if you know any edition of it, 2nd, 5th, 1st, OSR, whatever, the monsters are easily adaptable, hit points, AC, whatever. But it's really unique because it takes that well-known, almost Disney idea of Peter Pan and it turns it into a kind of bizarre but very cool D&D campaign setting. And it's really good. It came out last year, 2020. as I say, Andrew McMill's publishing. It's pretty reasonable price. You can pick it up still on Amazon, or even better yet, some small independent shop or site who probably needs your money better. But yeah, it's a great product. I think I picked it up for less than 20 quid. And it's really, really good, really interesting.
So what is it about the setting of Neverland that why should I choose to play in Neverland as opposed to Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or something? What is it about the Neverland that, because forgive me, but the story of Peter Pan isn't exactly something I'd put into an RPG at first thought. Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I mean, really, the idea of Peter Pan is it's ephemeral, isn't it? It's kind of it's fairy tale. It's kind of Victoriana, and it's kind of dreamlike. So I think that the way that it's most different to things like Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or whatever is it's less codified. It's more malleable. You can make what you want of it. You aren't going to get a lot of people sitting at your table telling you that actually the king of Neverwinter in Dale Reckoning year 3717 is actually somebody else, which is one of my massive bugbears especially about the Forgotten Realms now, as they've farmed it out for the kind of default setting for D&D 5th. People know the Sword Coast very, very well, and it's become an extended universe situation like Star Wars and Star Trek and stuff. So I mean, you avoid all of that kind of stuff, and I think you get a nice very high fantasy setting that a lot of people will relate to, even if they don't know it. I think Peter Pan's one of those things that we instinctively have a certain idea about in our mind when somebody says it. The boy who doesn't grow up. Oh yeah, it's a Disney. We've got Wendy flying through the, whatever. There's Captain Hook and a crocodile. We've got these kind of assumed ideas, and you just bring them to the table. There's going to be pirates. There's going to be a pirate ship. That all of those kind of things exist. So you're not surprised, but the way and the form that they are presented is surprising enough to keep it fresh. So the guys have done a really good job of twisting the very thin on the ground campaign setting material that exists in Peter Pan, because there's no maps of Neverland and there's no kind of description of their day-to-day culture and all this kind of stuff, and it is unashamedly old school fantasy gaming. So it is tromp around, go from hex to hex, and roll for wandering monsters and fight some stuff and get some treasure and all that kind of stuff. So it takes that old school approach to it rather than a very deeply well thought out realistic eco culture on the island that it's set on. It takes a more high fantasy approach, and that's why I mentioned kind of Lamentations and stuff at the beginning, because it's got that idea that you sit down and you're not going to take it too seriously. You don't need to know why the cultures are on the island. You don't need to know why the monster is there. You just need to know what you need to roll to hit it and how much experience it's going to get you and stuff like that. So
awesome. Okay, yeah, there is a bit of sort of suspension of disbelief, if you like. Your other players are signing up for this adventure.
Yeah, very much so.
I've got one burning question about this setting. Okay. Can I, if I play, can I romance Tinkerbell?
I don't see any reason why not.
There the sort of GM I like that GM style.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. See how these charisma rolls work out. But yeah, I mean, there's I guess there's always an opportunity for GMs and players to get really bizarre with that and to mess around with existing characters. But weirdly, and I know you didn't mean it like this, and to take the joke aside, I think part of what's fun about playing in any sort of licensed setting is the opportunity to interact, not necessarily like that, but to interact with NPCs. I know the joy that some groups have of kind of bumping into Han Solo or Darth Vader or the crew of the Enterprise if they're playing Star Trek. And this kind of cameo of existing well-known characters, I think, is something fun. And I think if you don't do that in a licensed RPG, I think you're kind of ignoring one of the big toys in the toy box.
Good point. I think it would be exciting playing in a Neverland setting, encountering a crocodile with an alarm clock in its belly or something, and all your players are like, it's that thing we remember, and you kind of... get to have a little scene with it or something like that. Or Captain Hook comes along and everyone's shit scared of Captain Hook or whatever it might be. Definitely, man.
Yeah, so I think there's, like I say, you if you're the GM and you bring Captain Hook into the game, the players will. There's a lot of assumed knowledge there. They know he's a bad guy. They know he's head of the pirates. They know he's got a hook for a hand. They know he doesn't like the crocodile. There's a lot of work has been done, and I think that's what's great. And it's a double-sided coin, isn't it, when you run a game, say like Star Wars, because the assumed knowledge that I've just mentioned is there in droves. You don't have to explain what a stormtrooper is. You don't have to explain what an X-wing fighter is. You can say you move into the hangar. There's a battered X-wing, and some stormtrooper helmets, and immediately players' minds are buzzing over with like, where are the rebels? Who's this? Who's killed the stormtroopers? All of this amazing stuff, which has been used, fan service in shows like The Mandalorian. There's these little nods that you can give away to the audience, the players in this instance, who are so well versed in this background that a mere sprinkling of that information is enough to kind of set their taste buds alight for the setting. And I think if you were to design a sci-fi setting for your own game, whether it's using Traveller or any other sci-fi game that you enjoy, teaching the other players the background is a thankless task. If you've picked up Eclipse Phase or Coriolis or Nibiru, which is one of the newer ones by Medphidius, if you are trying to A, teach the group a new set of mechanics, and B, trying to tell them what certain kind of aliens look like and ships look like, that's hard. Whereas a Carillion freighter or a Star Destroyer, it's just easy, isn't it? It's really easy.
And I mean, that's part of the draw. I want to play a Star Wars RPG because I want to be a bounty hunter or wield a lightsaber or do something that's universe specific. Otherwise, I wouldn't go to that game. So.
Exactly. And I've had these conversations quite a few times with it. If you're running Star Wars and you don't let the players go to, I don't know, Mos Eisley or Hoth, or you don't let them, hide in the smuggling compartment of a Millennium Falcon, or you don't let them fight stormtroopers, why bothering to play Star Wars? Don't make it so obscure. Play with the toys in the toy box. Let them see, maybe you don't have to use these big NPCs to over effect, but, if I'm playing Lord of the Rings, I want to meet Gandalf. I want to have a chat with him, you know what I mean? Like, I want to go to the Prancing Pony and Bree, I want to go to Weathertop, and, I want to see a Nazgul, all this kind of exciting things. Because if you just play Star Wars and you set the entire campaign on some random ass planet no one's ever heard of, and all of the aliens you've made up yourself and the societies, that's great, but it's not Star Wars.
I suppose that's a good point. It would just be sci-fi, wouldn't it? I guess. There is a new. I don't know if you've heard about this. There's a new era in the Star Wars canon that Disney have been releasing this month. Have you heard about this? So I kind of mentally dropped out of Star Wars quite a while ago. With the new movies, not really my cup of tea. With the banishment of the old canon, which I have kind of mixed feelings about. So I keep my eye on it a little bit, but I'm certainly not well versed on it. I did see something about them naming a new time period. So you actually have to tell me, because I genuinely don't know. Right. I've actually brought the flagship novel for this new era that they've released, so it's something that I want to talk about in more detail in another episode after I've read it.
Okay.
But it's called The High Republic, is what they've named this era, and it's 200 years before the Phantom Menace.
Right.
It's
okay.
An era of stability and growth within the universe. There's no Sith, so it's the Jedi. What Jedi describe themselves to be, and what our ideal of a perfect Jedi is in this kind of
actual, their golden age, so to speak.
Exactly, the golden age. And it's mostly young adult fiction, but Star Wars is for kids anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of books and graphic novels as well that Disney are doing. It looks decent, man.
So, what is the primary conflict in this era then? I mean, what is the cause for adventure?
The novel that I'm looking at now that's sitting on my shelf, which is called Light of the Jedi, involves a large-scale hyperspace disaster that has debris coming out of hyperspace throughout the galaxy at random, wreaking havoc across sectors. And the Jedi take on the role of disaster relief, and it's about how they kind of apply their own teachings and their relationship with the Force and their own inner conflicts and how they carry those across to help people and actually play the role of these healer monks as opposed to spinning lightsabers around like in episode 2 and 3. So there are villains. I think there's some kind of evil aliens in some of the other books, and there's some kind of bad guys dressed in dark colours, but there's no Sith because the Jedi haven't. There's no corruption within the Jedi, if you like. There's no dark side.
Right.
So it gives you a chance as a Star Wars fan to look at the Jedi while the Jedi are examining their own relationships with the Force, and the Force is represented in these different ways based on who the Jedi are and their own personalities. It looks pretty interesting, man.
I mean, as I've just said, my Star Wars extended universe knowledge is by no means strong, but isn't the Sith something that has existed for many, 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 many years, kind of hidden behind the veil, or is that been scrapped now? Is that the Sith literally don't exist yet, kind of thing?
I mean, you're right. If you look at something like Knights of the Old Republic, which is set 1,000 years before everything else, there are Sith around. So the canon's all over the fucking place because Disney are just doing their own thing. So I in this timeline, I guess would be one way to say it. There's no Sith.
So they're not. Either way, they're not overtly out there anyway.
Yeah, they don't exist at all in this thing, from what I can tell. There's no mention of them or anything.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's just more about when things are good, why and how are they good, and they talk about that for a bit. Like I said, I think it's a young adults series.
Yeah, interesting though, isn't it, to pick a time period to explore that doesn't seem to have a major conflict, because I guess with what you call the Rebellion era, the Rebels versus the Empire, and then in the old canon, the New Republic, throne and all that kind of stuff, you could see where the conflict was, and I think they explored the universe enough that eventually they had to bring in the Yuuzhan Vong as a threat.
Wow, you're getting old school now.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but wow. I mean, to focus on these different time periods within the universe, there's always tends to be the threat of conflict between two opposing sides, and that's kind of what makes Star Wars for me. So it's interesting to kind of hear about a time period where everything's going okay, and I guess maybe they'll pull the rug under that and everything is not okay, and I guess that's where the joy is. But to present a universe in a stable fashion, it could be argued that's not the most exciting time period to either read about or to play games in.
I suppose I will read this and get back to you. I don't know if I agree with that, to be honest. I think there's
different ways to look at it. I mean, I'm tying parallels with, but I mean, what is the major source of conflict? And who do the Jedis have to deal with? Would be my major question.
Keep these questions in mind. I'll answer them afterwards.
Good.
I'm definitely going to read at least this flagship novel, Light of the Jedi, and maybe some more stuff. But
do you know, I can relate this a little bit to some old school games, and because the way that we're talking about it. So I'm going to talk about Traveller, which is a game I've mentioned a few times and has had many iterations throughout its long life. I consider Traveller to be one of the main big three pillars of role-playing industry. It's been around for a long time, and the Traveller universe, very much like the Star Wars universe, has different products that focus on different time periods. And one of the major time periods is what's referred to as the Third Imperium of man, where mankind has spread himself across the stars and his civilization is doing well and prospering and all of this stuff, which reminds me of this time period. And you think, is this a good time for a role-playing game? Because, where's the conflict? So I guess that there was enough interest to keep that Third Imperium idea going, whereas a lot of the other incarnations of Traveller dealt with a rebellion, the destruction of the Empire, the release of a universe-wide virus, the beginning of the Empire itself, which is kind of, exploration and an adventure. So I think it's unusual to pick a time period of stability for the setting of a role-playing game, certainly. And I know this is not what you're talking about. You're talking about books and comics and stuff. But from a role player's perspective, it's an unusual choice.
Yeah, I think the main kind of draw for a lot of settings is you want something where there's a wider overarching narrative going on that you play a part in or have a hand in. So, something like Shadow of the Demon Lord, where the fucking world is ending and you're playing at the edge of the apocalypse. You want something bigger going on that you can feel like you're contributing to.
Yeah, as the old saying goes, you are living in interesting times. I mean, that's kind of, I guess, part of the point of any exciting, fiction or movie or game or whatever. There has to be something really exciting happening to kind of draw you in. Do you know what I mean? But and like you say, you can get back to me after you've read it, and we'll see what or maybe it's just that they're dipping their toe into the water of different time periods because the reaction overall to the most recent movies obviously hasn't been stellar. So I think they need to diversify if they're going to keep Star Wars alive, which they are already doing. I understand that. New animated series and Boba Fett series and all this kind of stuff, and they're going to do it.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made, and this is something that is repeated on the YouTube channel Red Letter Media, which is a great YouTube channel, but they review Star Wars, various films and whatever. There's only so much you can do with Star Wars, really. Our idea of Star Wars is AT-ATs, snowspeeders, X-wings going down the trenches at the Death Star. That's so anything else past that kind of needs to have those hooks. So for us to go, oh yeah, that's Star Wars. Like in one of the most modern films, there's basically most of the newer films just recreate the old films because that's what people recognise as Star Wars. Star Wars is quite narrow if you think about it.
But isn't that what we, maybe as slightly older viewers, see as Star Wars rather than what new fans will perceive as Star Wars? I mean, people who came along maybe even just when Last Jedi first came out, do you know what I mean? Like things like that, or people who came along after Revenge of the Sith, do they see a very different Star Wars? That to them it's clone troopers, people who grew up watching the cartoon, the Clone Wars. Star Wars is very different to them than it is to us, probably. I mean, not wildly different, but it has different key notes to it.
I mean, I suppose, but it's all the same in that what's a clone trooper? It's a stormtrooper. And what's the new series of films? Well, they're just remakes of the old films. Oh, what was the Clone Wars? Oh, it was just a thing that's caused the Stormtroopers and Boba Fett to come into existence. Characters from the original films, like it was the '79 film and Empire as well was a microcosm of originality, and everything that's come after and around that is basically kind of drawing off those touch points, those touchstones.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue with that, isn't it? But I mean, if you follow that logic through long enough, we get to Star Wars is a bit shit.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, not me.
I'm not in a position where I want to defend Star Wars anymore, and I think there are a lot of people who feel like me. It isn't the sacrosanct kind of property that I felt that I really need to defend at all. I mean, I think it's fair game. Whoever wants to comment on Star Wars in any way, positive or negative, they can just have at it, and they can be right as far as I'm concerned, because like I say, I've kind of mentally bought out of it quite a long time ago, because I don't think it's for me. I think maybe you're right, they are spinning another cycle of stories that are the same cycle of stories for a new generation, but then you would think they'd want to get me back in, and I realise that there's that nostalgic pull and that fan service that they do to drag us back in. So it's interesting to see what they've done with The Mandalorian versus the main movies, and I can see Star Wars surviving better as this kind of Netflix style menagerie of TV shows following different characters that occasionally cross over with each other, so that you have to watch them all to understand it. I can see that being the future of Star Wars more than these kind of big budget movies.
Yeah, true. I mean, well, 2 points about The Mandalorian to counter each other, but I mean, I only watched it recently because everyone was telling me to do so, and everyone knows that I am fond of Star Wars. I really enjoyed it, but what's good about it is all the things that we recognise from other films and all Easter eggs that have been in other things, and you go, oh, it's that person from this, or oh, it's that thing from over there, and the style in which all those things are brought together is the style of Western films or samurai films. So there's very little originality in The Mandalorian if you think about it, from a narrative point of view. On the other hand, one thing that is groundbreaking and original about it is the video effects and the way that they've made it, and that's something that I think it should be praised for.
Yeah, I mean, we can get down into this, this Mandalorian rabbit hole, and I think there's a lot of things to appreciate about it, and I think to write it off would be wrong. I think that there's a lot of value in it. I think it's been done really well. It's been done by somebody who really cares about the universe, and I think shares an old school view of the universe. A traditional, what we call first gen Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, without a doubt. But there are parts of that show which to me feel a little bit like Doctor Who. And that is not good, the kind of where the budget falls down and the aliens, tentacles don't really look great, and they're running around a spaceship that's flashing red, and it's kind of, it's kind of like, oh no, like don't do this to me, please. I'm kind of suspending my disbelief to get into this universe and these characters, and then, and I think it suffers from. It's really hard because there must be a real balance to pepper the show with enough little references to the originals, but without going whole hog into it. And I get that. I get it's a delicate balance. And, I'm not sitting here saying, I could have wrote a better show than The Mandalorian. I'm not saying that. But you're right. There's a lot borrowed. It's very Lone Wolf and Cub. It's very kind of, Kung Fu. It's very Wagon Trail. It's very Monster of the Week at one point, and I get that. And all of that's kind of necessary in a way to kind of tack the Star Wars project, and it's an unusual project. It's the first time it's been done with Star Wars. You want to tack it onto a formula that's tried and tested in order to give it the best chance, because that overarching plot that people don't have to worry too much about, they just get shiny things and gunfights and stuff, which is kind of cool. But there are definitely moments of it where they haven't kept up that level, that high level of production, and that's what you don't get with the movies. Whether you dislike the plot and the characters and the way that they've dealt with certain characters, that's a separate issue. There is no point in the big budget movies where the quality of production ever falls. Everything always looks good, and in fact, as the movies have gone on, they continue to look better. And I mean, one of the big things that I got really excited about when the new movies came out was, I want to see people chasing each other in speeders or starships through a crashed Star Destroyer. I mean, that looks immense. It looked great. So, and I realize, The Mandalorian is a TV show, not a movie. I get that. I appreciate that. There are budgetary constraints and restrictions. But when you make so much of it look good and you make other parts of it look really weak, I just think a chain is only so strong as its weakest link, isn't it? So, I mean, to me, I think it's something, it's a project that has been wheeled out to test the water, and it's turned out very well, and I think it's going to spawn a lot of Disney Star Wars TV shows. Part of me is concerned about the fact that one of those shows will be Boba Fett, and I don't know how much difference there will be between a Boba Fett show and a Mandalorian show.
Oh yeah.
I mean, surely the only reason they did a Mandalorian show is they didn't want to ruin Boba Fett, just in case it didn't work, right? I mean, otherwise, that is a Boba Fett TV show, right?
I guess. I did like Boba Fett coming into it, to be honest. I like how they got Tamara Morrison back, and he's looking for his armor at first, and he's got that Maori fighting style with his club. I thought all that was pretty cool, man. I did like Boba Fett in the Mandalorian.
I like what they've done, but for me, if they do I daren't call it a spin-off, but if they do a Boba Fett spin-off from the Mandalorian TV show, I don't know how different that can be, and I hope they prove me wrong. I hope it's radically different in tone and feel and whatever, but to just do two TV shows side by side, unless now that they know it works, they get rid of the Mandalorian and they tie that up and they focus on Boba Fett having utilized the lessons they've learned, and they move forward with the major characters that they didn't dare to do beforehand because they didn't want to wreck it. Because, I mean, Boba Fett is essentially... It's hard to argue that he's not the most iconic Star Wars character.
Outside of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, you mean?
No. Out of
more
all of the
characters.
Vader. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly more loved by fans, I think, and more respected and more kind of sacred to the Disney cash cow, in my opinion.
I think older first generation Star Wars fans definitely have idealized view of this Boba Fett character that younger generation people don't have that same opinion of. Like watching Empire Strikes Back for the first time and Darth Vader lining up those bounty hunters, and it's sort of, that's the moment where the Star Wars universe opens up and you see this line of criminal or bounty hunters, all these hardened, like, tough guys, and you're like, oh, Star Wars isn't just moisture farming on Tatooine. Look at all this other crazy stuff that's happening. Where have these guys come from? And that impact that has on you the first time you watch Empire is completely lost by the time you've watched these ones that are made for the Chinese audience, where they're going around casinos or whatever they're doing, these new films. I think the impact's completely different. So Boba Fett, probably for people like us who watched it since we were small, the original ones, definitely has that vibe, whereas maybe not so much anymore. It's definitely for the older fans. But then, like I said, isn't Star Wars kind of narrow? Mandalorian and Boba Fett are going to be similar because there's not really much else you can do with the characters.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting you mention all the fans, and we've mentioned that before, but I mean, if you look at, this has been released on a streaming service which costs money and requires adults to pay for it. So if you want to be kind of brutal and kind of capitalist about it, they have to appeal to the people paying the bills. They have to kind of say to the dads, "Oh, I'm going to get Disney because then I can sit and watch The Mandalorian with my girl or boy or child or whatever." Right. You know, this is Disney. It's great, and they can watch all this other shit. You know, The Lion King, 4 or whatever. Like, Mustafa's Return from the Dead, whatever they want to watch, and no spoilers. So but then they get to watch The Mandalorian, which is their kind of their fix of Gen 1 Star Wars. They're kind of, and it appeals to the Westerns and the Kurosawa and all that kind of stuff if they're old enough to kind of get into all that. But it's no surprise that it's kind of marketed at that older customer because he's going to be paying the bills, whereas something like the Clone Wars cartoon or whatever is farmed out. And I mean, that is for kids. Yes, it has some joy, and I know a lot of adults who've watched it and enjoyed it in the way that anyone can enjoy cartoons, and that's fine. But I think The Mandalorian's very different, and without repeating myself, I think it was a test in the water, and I think now that the test has been proven to be successful, it wouldn't surprise me if The Mandalorian kind of disappears and is replaced by other more iconic, more money-grabbing ideas that can be utilised now that the safety has been assured.
Right, that's an interesting take. Yeah, probably you're right there. I like what you're saying about they need to appeal to the people who are going to be paying that monthly fee for Disney Plus. Definitely.
Yeah,
man. But it has been groundbreaking in the way that they've done the video stage, the screen stage for the sets. Do you know much about that?
I don't. Tell me.
So this is fascinating to me, and this is something that is, you got to go back and watch The Mandalorian again after you know how they've developed these effects, because it's astonishing. But there's no green screen, right, in The Mandalorian.
Okay.
There isn't a single green screen.
Okay.
What they do instead is they've got this stage somewhere in the Disney studios, which is like a big flat circle stage surrounded by high-res LED screens, and they project onto the screens like the landscape of Tatooine or the swamps or wherever they are, or the night streets of Coruscant, or wherever he's going on his adventures, and they project these images onto the screen around them. So the natural lighting from these environments is reflecting off his Beskar armor. It's reflecting off the skin of the people that are there. If there's a campfire in the scene, they have that campfire there in front of the character, and the light from the fire reflects back onto the environment around them, because it's not fake. It's all happening around him in real time. So if you go back and watch an episode, for example, if he's standing talking to someone, and in the background behind him is like rocky mountains or a desert or something, that's actually behind him on a screen. And sometimes on the wider shots, you can see where the stage stops and the screen begins. There's like a line that the characters
like
are
kind of
walking
front
towards.
screen projection almost.
Yeah. So you can see that. Go on YouTube if you're listening to this, and there's a video by VOX, and they break it down. And these Disney guys who work with Industrial Light and Magic go into the details about how they've produced this new way of creating environments with natural lighting, and they can project like the image of a speeder bike or something, and the actors will all see it at the same time and react to it in real time. If there's an explosion, those lights are real and will light the character's eyes and light the character's skin in real time. So there's no more fakery or people looking at dots. Like if you look at something like the Avengers, that's all characters running around on a stage surrounded by green. Surrounded by a green screen, and to play the Hulk, he's got a big tennis ball over his head. There's none of that because they're actually reacting to the screen and reacting to CG imagery that is being played in real time while they're shooting. I think that's fascinating, man. It's really interesting.
Yeah, cool. That is interesting. I'll check that out.
Yeah. So that goes back to what you're saying about they're testing the waters, because they're literally testing out this new technology and seeing if it works. So watch an episode of The Mandalorian and keep that in mind. They're on a stage and they're surrounded by screens. It's honestly, it's fascinating. So fair play to those guys, because that's Jon Favreau has really broken some new ground there in terms of ways to produce and make a TV show.
Cool.
So wow, that was The Mandalorian. Right, mate, I'm glad we took that little tangent. That was good. What else have we got to talk about? I want to tell you about a little role-playing game that I found on itch.io that would be something suitable for maybe locked down players or people who are in quarantine. It's a very unorthodox style of game.
You have my attention.
It's called, well, I'd hope so. It's called Amble. It's by a writer called Kieran Gillen.
Kieran Gillen, the comic book writer.
I don't know. Let me get back to you on that one.
Okay, all right. I just wonder whether he's the same Kieran Gillen who did Phonogram for Image Comics back in the day.
Let me have a look. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm
sweet.
looking at his page right now.
Really good guy. Signed some Phonogram for me back in the day. Yeah.
Cool. All right then. I'm on his itch.io page as we speak. Yeah,
right.
He's done Phonogram and a bunch of other credentials.
Yeah, he's done a bunch of other stuff, but I mean, Phonogram is... We'll talk about that in a bit or another episode or whatever, but that is brilliant. I don't want to stop you from the thing. So this is Kieran Gillen, right? Okay, sweet.
Nice, man. Good spot there. So this is by a guy who I didn't know, but now I know is apparently some legit writer. It's called Amble. It's a narrative game for two people who go on separate walks. So if you're going on a solo walk during this lockdown period, or if you find yourself out and about and you have a friend who wants to cooperate with you, you can play this game. You call your friend, and the whole game takes place as a conversation over the phone. You play two friends who have met up in person and are describing to each other anecdotes about the difficulties on your journey to get to meet your friend, if you like. It's about half an hour. The game itself is on itch.io for free, and it's just one page, and it's just a few quick sets of rules about the sort of conversation leads and hooks that you should give to each other. And it's basically you and another player kind of creating a narrative as you walk along, using cues from both of your environments to bring into the story.
So, all right, okay. So in terms of playing, are they creating a joint story? They're telling each other a separate story, or?
So you create two stories, one for each of you, about how you both come to meet with each other, like pretending that you are in the same place when you're on the phone, like, oh, how was your journey, kind of thing, like that. So
right, okay.
While it is collaborative, you're both telling your own story, and while one player is telling theirs, the other player is prompting, if you're like a GM, I suppose, prompting the teller about clues and picking up hooks and hints from their environment and asking them the questions to fuel their storytelling, and then it swaps.
Dude, that sounds brilliant. It makes me want to go out tomorrow and call someone, probably you, and say, right, I'm going to play Amble now, and this is how we play it. It sounds great. I'm going to check that out. I mean, I'm going to check that out tonight, like straight away. So that sounds really good.
I'll send you the link, and we'll put the link in the show notes for anyone who's listening.
We'll do a post on Instagram and link it to that, because what I can say about the creator, I didn't realize he'd be doing a game, but his graphic novel work is excellent, and he's a really nice guy as well, a top-notch guy, very smart, very well versed in English Britpop music, which is kind of a lot of the basis for Phonogram, which I mean, I'm not his personal biographer, but I think that was the work that kind of brought him to kind of prominence. If it's not, sorry, Kieran. But sorry if you did some really cool stuff before that, and I only really got on the ground with Phonogram. But Phonogram can still be picked up, collected versions from Image Comics. I think there's 3 volumes. Really, really worth reading, especially for anybody of a certain age or who likes kind of Britpop music, the music of the late 90s, British stuff, Oasis, Blur, Shed 7, all that kind of stuff, Pulp. Really great, and for any fans of stuff like Mage the Ascension, games like that, you will just love Phonogram. So I can't rate that highly enough. I think maybe what I'll do is I'll dust off the graphic novels, and on another episode we'll do a Phonogram review.
Yeah, that's got my attention, certainly. That sounds like a strange mix.
Yeah, it's like kind of it's a really interesting mix of music and magic. It's set in kind of, you know, modern day with kind of phonomancers, so kind of magicians who use music to kind of cast magic. It's got some really, really interesting kind of themes through it, and it's very human. It's very, very well written. From a guy who's very talented. So and I know this game concept, it seems just like a little very short thing, but I'm sure it's been well thought out. So I'm excited to look at that.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, I'll send you the link, man.
Yeah.
It looks like a fun little game, and he says you can play it in half an hour, and all you need is a mobile phone and a mate.
That's cool. That's really cool. I like that. Because it's interesting, isn't it? And it's made me look, this whole lockdown situation. And I know that we've talked about it before, you know, the online games versus real games and getting people together around a virtual table. But there are games that have existed before this, which cater to players who were isolated by geography or technology. And I think maybe it's a good time to just throw out a few for people who are interested in listening about that kind of thing, that kind of collaborative experience where you may not have a lot of time or whatever. There's a Cthulhu inspired writing game called De Profundis. I think it's fairly easy to pick the PDF up. Physical copies can be pretty hard to find now, and it's a great set of rules for collaborative world building in a Cthulhu setting, by writing letters to each other, but actual letters. I'm sure you could do it via email, but the idea is to write a letter and post it to the other person, and then for that person, and that person to open it, and you know, it tells you to, like, you know, prepare your room and, you know, put a candle on and kind of, you know, put some background music on and wait till late at night and read the letter and then write your reply, and I think there's something really wholesome and really in touch with the human emotion and spirit about that kind of idea of letter writing. And especially for any Lovecraft fans, definitely check out De Profundis. It's something that I intended to do at the beginning of Lockdown 1, and that I still haven't got around to, and, you know, enough going on right now that I don't think I will in any hurry, but it's the kind of the thing that I've always entertained wanting to do, especially if I hadn't been blessed and lucky enough to be part of other online games. That would have been the kind of game that would have scratched that role-playing itch. And it just talking about that Amble game made me think of De Profundis. And I'm sure there are others. There are kind of solo letter-writing games. I know there's a vampire one, which I can't remember the name of. You kind of tell the story of your vampire over generations. I think that's a solo letter writing game, or that kind of thing. Well, not a letter, but a solo writing game. There's a few of these things, and I'll have to think out. There's another good one called Quill, I think, which is a solo game, which I've read, which is very good. Again, PDF, easily accessible. Physical version, maybe not so much. But good. I'm interested and excited that a shitty situation is making some creative people think outside the box and come up with these kind of game concepts. I think that's great. I think that's part of, what makes you feel good about human ingenuity and spirit. And, two people can have a chat and, maybe they've sick of telling each other that they've done nothing all week. Then maybe they can, write a story together, for half an hour and pass the time, and, it could turn into something, bigger and better, a role-playing game when we all get back together. But, I think that's great. I'm definitely glad you mentioned that. I'm going to check that out. That sounds really right up my street.
Yeah, and that De Profundis sounds awesome as well. I like the idea of a game taking place over letters, man. That sounds really cool.
Well, it's great because the canon of the game is anything that is written down. So as you write backwards and forwards between either your single person that you're writing to or a group of people kind of add to the narrative from their own perspective, and the world and the plot builds up from that. It's very inspired. I quite like it, and I love the idea of getting a letter. And it's quite often said that you should write a letter to the person. So you can play it in different ways. I don't want to get too much into it now. We can maybe talk later, but you can play it as yourself. So you could write a letter to your friend's name and explain the fantasy things that have happened to you in your real life, even though they haven't happened. Or you can set it like in the 20s or the 1890s and write letters from a character. And if you write letters as a character, you address it to the character. So
that's my jam.
So if my character is like, I don't know, Donald whoever, then as the letter falls through the door addressed to Donald, whatever, I'll be like, it's a letter for my character, and then that's when you want to take yourself aside, sit down, get into character before you read it. And I just think that sounds so great. It's almost like LARP in a way. So
get the fountain pens out.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Awesome, oh, okay. There's a rule book for that. Is there a call book?
There is a rule book, and it's not this kind of 1-page D8 table shit. Like it's like it's a real kind of decent page count, well written, rounded off product. Especially for De Profundis, that gives a lot of guidance and a lot of ideas about different styles of way to play that game. It's well worth a look by anyone who's interested in Lovecraft. And maybe, do you know what? Maybe I'll put it out there now. I'll do a post about it, and maybe we'll get a few people who might want to, and we'll go on the Discord, the Human Energy Field podcast Discord, and it might be a good way for people to meet other people who might want to play letter writing games or telephone, call games. Maybe it's a good weekend. There's a lot of ways to get in touch, but maybe one more isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I think so, and obviously shout outs to our heroic postal workers who would allow all that to happen at the moment and are delivering things to us all around the country. They're the real heroes, aren't they, at the moment?
Yeah, let's clap for them.
Yeah. Unless it's a 1d8 table.
Nobody needs
that. Sold as a product in itself, in which case you can keep that, Mr. Postman. I don't want that anymore.
I've ordered a copy of that Detectorists zine, which Bordy put us onto. Shout out Bordy. And it hasn't arrived yet, but have you read it, or have you got one on the way?
No, mate. I spotted the geezer's account on Instagram. He does a lot. He puts out a lot of good zines and stuff like that. But I've yet to order it. No.
Right. I'll let you know when it arrives. Maybe I'll shout it out on another episode. But I've ordered that and a few other zines and a collection of Hellboy. I've took the plunge and ordered them as well. So, have I got you on Fiddler's Green yet? Well, as we're talking about zines and stuff.
Oh yes, I love a bit of Fiddler's Green, man. They're awesome. They are.
We'll have to talk about that a bit more in depth one time. Magical kind of books for the tea drinking anarchists.
I'll tell you what, we'll have to do a whole zine episode after Nate's thing is shipped or wherever.
Yeah.
We'll
is that still open for submissions, or is that done now?
Today's the last day. By the time this recording comes out, that'll all be finished.
Oh, right, okay.
But yeah, we'll do that, mate, because there's nothing I love more than a good zine of you read it, you know that someone's put their love into these little cheap pages, and it's a real sense of connection with the author on the other side that you might not get with a glossy novel. So that's something that I really like about it, and the subject matter is always wild and weird and crazy as well. So that's always it's always a plus to me to be able to buy these little zines from people, usually off Instagram, and get a look into a world which I may otherwise have not been able to witness. One other series of books I have been indulging in recently is the Earthsea series by Ursula K. Le Guin. Have you read any Earthsea books?
I am familiar with them, obviously. I've seen them, the kind of names bandied around, and the animated version, but I haven't read the actual novels, no.
I did not know there was an animated version. Is it any good?
I believe it was. You have to, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's maybe not Studio Ghibli, or somebody connected to Studio Ghibli. I know, maybe
Cool.
Son or somebody. But no, apparently it's not a very good version.
Oh, okay.
Apparently it is not. It is not liked by the author, I don't think.
Right. Well, I mean, the author, for anyone who doesn't know, Ursula K. Le Guin is a seminal science fiction writer who has been doing this for decades. I think she was writing in the 60s and 70s. She is, I suppose you could say there was a lot of feminist themes throughout her work. Although in my experience that hasn't always been the case, but I don't know if she's just a product of her time. But for anyone who's interested in any kind of world building, science fiction or fantasy, you really got to get some Ursula K. Le Guin down here. There's no one else who writes like her at the moment. R.I.P. as well. I really like her book The Dispossessed, which is about a theoretical physicist from an anarchist planet who goes to a capitalist planet to help them with their science, and then cultural clashes ensue. That's a great book. And I also like her book The Left Hand of Darkness, which is about a diplomat from a galactic conglomerate who visits a planet to try and get them to join their coalition. And the planet that he visits is populated by a race of humanoids that are genderless and only sort of evolve into a gender when it's time for them to mate with each other. And then after the mating is done, they go back to being genderless. And then she explores all these sorts of questions like how are people viewed when there's no gender on a world, and what does that entail for things like leadership and work and sexual consent. Is there such thing as non-consenting sex when there's no genders? There's all these very awesome and strange kind of themes that she plays with in The Left Hand of Darkness. That's a great book to read. Heartbreaking at the end. I really recommend that. Good bit of science fiction, that is. So because I've read those and I've had a great experience with them, I decided to pick up her Earthsea series. I've only read the first two. I've got the first four here. I feel like finishing the first two has given me enough credentials to kind of bring it up and see what you think about it. It follows the kind of basic formula of young apprentice mage who learns his craft and goes off on adventures. But there's some pretty heavy themes that run throughout. She's got this idea of all actions have consequences, and in the case of the first book, the mistakes of the main character literally take a physical form, which then pursue him through the course of the book, and he has to literally and figuratively face up to his own mistakes. It's a great setup for a story. It really is. The second book in the series is called The Tombs of Atuan, and it's the main character from the first book encountering a high priestess who is in a environment against her will, and that explores the themes of well, the idea of a protagonist not being an active participant in their fate, which is something that I've been reading about recently. Our idea of the protagonist of the story needing to be active and needing to drive the narrative and make their own decisions, and how they have to be at the center of the story in terms of the conflicts that are occurring, is something that she was challenging even back then when this was written. I believe it was in the 80s. Correct me if I'm wrong. Apparently it's quite a white Western view to have an active protagonist, the Joseph Campbell hero, if you like, and she challenges that here by having this protagonist, this high priestess who is surviving, and it's a story of survival. All she's trying to do is exist within a world that has been built around her to keep her trapped for various other reasons. So there's a lot going on, man. There's a lot of great themes here, but the idea of the passive protagonist is something that I wanted to mention because I thought I wanted to get your take on it. Basically,
it is so I can just get a little bit of a deeper understanding of these Earthsea books, because obviously you mentioned that obviously she's writing some science fiction. Is the Earthsea series fantasy, or is it science fiction masquerading as fantasy, or is it more kind of trad fantasy?
Sorry, yeah, I would say it's traditional fantasy. I suppose it's that sort of
low tech level magic, dragons, that kind of shit.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she bridges all kinds of gaps. She does all kinds of stuff, and her science fiction is really original in a lot of ways.
When you were talking about her science fiction, I was getting some real kind of Ian M. Banks vibes from it. Some real culture novel kind of vibes about it. So
yeah, I think Ian M. Banks' culture stuff is, I would say, more kind of techie. Mm-hmm. I think maybe his
stuff.
Yeah, I love his culture stuff. Yeah, me too. I've got Player of Games down here. I still need to read.
So to me, it's probably my favorite Player of Games. So,
awesome. Okay,
yeah.
But Ian M. Banks, I don't know if it's a male writer thing, but a lot of his stuff is definitely more kind of, it goes into the hardware and the tech side of things, and Ursula K. Le Guin's science fiction is more about exploring these social ideals that wouldn't exist on our planet or in our world. She kind of uses science fiction as a vehicle to look at cultures and
almost like an allegorical
way.
Perspective.
Yeah. I would recommend Left Hand of Darkness. It's a cracking book, really good read.
Okay, yeah, I'll check that out, because, as I say, it's a writer that I've been aware of, and there are so many, but it so far I haven't got round to picking up anything and reading it. So tell me, what got you into picking up the first time you read her? Was it by accident? Were you put onto it by somebody else? I mean, what got you to read her books in the first place?
Good question. I think I heard about her. Maybe I read about her on Twitter or in some kind of article. Just the idea of a feminist science fiction author from the 60s was enough for me to go, all right, let me try and find one of these books then. Where can I start with this author? It was just...
So the idea that she had feminist leanings was that a draw to you? Was that what you wanted to kind of get into that and maybe see a bit of that and experience that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think also the idea that not only is she a feminist writer, but the fact that she's been doing it for so long. Let me just have a look when she published this book. But it's not like she's a feminist author in 2020.
Right.
Oh yeah, Left Hand of Darkness was published in 1969.
Wow.
So
okay.
That was the draw for me. Really, is like, wow, what was that like at that time? What is a feminist science fiction author writing in the late 60s? So I think it was a time period as well, which made me go, but let me check this out.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's it's timeless as a book. It really holds up.
Do you think, and this might be a bit deep, but just before you move off topic, I just think it's a really pertinent question. Do you think we as who identify as male readers should take efforts to explore fiction that promotes a more gender equal or indeed positive feminine viewpoint?
Nah, fuck 'em. No, of course.
No, but do you think it's our duty to do that, or do you think feminist books are written to empower women, or do you think they're to inform and educate, or do you think we as men should be making an effort to read more female writers and read more feminist writers, or do you think it's not written for us?
I see what you're saying. No, I think I think if anyone, we as male readers have more of a duty to pay attention to that sort of thing than a female reader might do. I think it's more on us to seek out that kind of
the females
thing.
Are getting it because they're living it, they're experiencing it. This is an echo of their experiences, whereas to us it's an education.
I suppose that's one way to look at it. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, what do you read a book to go into a world that is different than your own, really, don't you? You want to go somewhere and learn something new, and you want to experience a new thing and have your imagination be tweaked in different ways.
But also it's maybe a vehicle for us to, after the fantasy is finished and the book has been read, it might be a catalyst for us to view the world differently and therefore act maybe differently.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. One thing that I read recently, Twitter's great for this sort of hot takes on this literature stuff, but someone said every time you read a book where it only describes non-white characters, that book is a vehicle for whiteness. So, I mean, it happens all the time. The only time a character's skin colour is mentioned is when they have dark skin. Otherwise, it's assumed that the character is white and it's never mentioned. That book is a vehicle for the white establishment in a way, because it's carrying whiteness around with it, assuming that that's the norm, as opposed to...
Oh, so you mean when you read a novel where the colour of the skin isn't mentioned, that's a vehicle for whiteness? Is that what you're saying?
If that novel mentions characters with darker skin as being different than for example, than the protagonists.
Right. Okay.
If that makes sense, I hope I'm explaining.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, just to drag it back to kind of feminist writers, etc. I mean,
of course,
it intrigues me because I studied literature, and one of the authors which I was blessed enough to have been introduced to through study was Margaret Atwood. And obviously this was quite a while ago, longer than I care to mention, decades ago, let's just put it that way. And having been given her novel Cat's Eye to study, which I'm not going to get into right now, but is a brilliant novel, and anyone who's into art and esoterica and the tarot especially can do a lot worse than to pick up Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye. But through Cat's Eye, as a gateway drug, to reuse your comment from earlier, got me into reading things like The Handmaid's Tale, which obviously a lot of people now know from the TV show. And I always felt really positive, especially when I was younger, reading a feminist writer's fiction. I felt that was a good thing to do, and I don't know whether that's me wearing, parading some ally badge, on my t-shirt and all that kind of stuff. You can be accused of all that, but I just think I found it was a fresh way of looking at things, and maybe, hopefully, we live in a world where the gender of authors isn't as important as it used to be, and is a lot more varied and all of those kind of things. But it also made me think of the very recent hit book Vox. I don't know if you were aware of that.
No.
I can highly recommend anyone to pick up a copy of Vox. It's very kind of Margaret Atwood in feel. It's very Handmaid's Tale. It's very dystopian future where the female part of the population is put down. But it's very frightening. It's very Black Mirror-esque, and it was very popular a couple of years ago, 2 years ago or something. I think it should be in paperback now for people who want to pick up Vox. But it made me think about you were talking about Ursula and female science fiction writers, because it only requires a very brief look through the Appendix N authors in Dungeons and Dragons, to drag this back to role-playing again, to see that most of, if not almost all of these writers are male. So, and I mean, maybe that's a product of its time. The Appendix N was put together in the kind of mid-70s, and there's been a lot of female writers after that, which could be included. But if you look at stories and writers who have influenced Dungeons and Dragons and therefore influenced role-playing as a whole, it is your Fritz Leiber, your Moorcock, your Tolkien, your Robert E. Howard, your H.P. Lovecraft, your Clark Ashton Smith, your Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I could go on. But there's not a lot of female, and I'm trying to think now whether there is any female writers in Appendix N. I'm sure there are. I think Lynn Carter's in there. Lynn Carter or Matt? Anyway, there may be some in there. But I think if I was doing a Dungeons and Dragons recommended reading list now, Ursula would be in that list. And even though I haven't read anything, but I know she's out there enough, and maybe that's a good thing. So it's really interesting to see how D&D's got a very masculine perspective, and maybe if the Appendix N was different, D&D wouldn't have been stuck in this chainmail bikini period for such a long time before it's become the very, very, very safe kind of intellectual property that it is now, and becoming even more safe, I believe. I don't want to rock the boat and talk about Wizards of the Coast decisions to promote equality in all aspects of its hobby, but I think they're certainly a champion of that cause, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. If you could play the purist argument and say, well, we just want more people to join the hobby, and it's as simple as that. Really, yeah. Like, what else needs to be said apart from let's just get as many people as we can into this great hobby that we love so much, and then what else needs to be said, really? I suppose that's one way of looking at it. But in order to do that, then you start to break down, well, how do we get that done? Well, representation, etc., etc., and then it becomes a question of who you're looking at and who you're recruiting and that kind of thing. So,
but do you think, I mean, to kind of get back around to my question, do you think that if people listening to this and they're looking at their bookshelves and, their science fiction and horror and fantasy books, and if they dash their eyes across the spines and read man after man after man after man, and there's not a lot of female names there, do you think it's kind of a duty for us to go out and maybe discover some female authors, or do you think that's maybe overthinking it? We don't need to do that.
No, I don't think it's overthinking it. I would say take an active part. Yeah, definitely. It would be your duty to pursue visions and imaginations that are separate to yours. If you want to be a rounded reader, if you want different experiences, especially if you're trying to be a writer, it works to read as many different things as you can. But even if you're just a fan of fantasy books or science fiction books or films, I think it is your duty, particularly if you're a male or you identify as masculine, to go out and find different viewpoints. It will help you understand how the other gender sees the world, and I think that's very important, because the same way that we put social commentary into the stories we write, you get to see the social commentary from different perspectives, and then that gives you a sense of what's going on in other people's heads. Like something like The Handmaid's Tale could have never been written by a man.
It would have been very different if it had, I agree, yeah. I mean, that is not to say that there aren't any male writers out there who can appreciate and understand the female cause, because of course they can, but then the counter argument is that it's an outsider's perspective. So I don't know, it's very delicate, but I think if I take anything from the fact that you brought up her novels, it's maybe I will think the next time that I'm picking up some science fiction or some fantasy and I'm trying a new author, maybe I will, make an effort to get an author who isn't necessarily the same gender or background or whatever that I am, in order to broaden that perspective. And I would like to think that my reading's fairly broad anyway, but I just think it never hurts to keep that in mind, does it? And move forward with that idea.
Exactly, man. I think so. I think that's a good way to look at things, because it's going to give you fresh perspectives on things. And look, I mean, it might be that you find something you weren't expecting, or it might be that you find something that is very familiar to you. Like for example, this first Earthsea book, the protagonist is a young boy. His teachers are all male wizards. He goes to a male wizard academy where there are specifically no women allowed. There's almost no women in the first book. It's not like it's there's nothing shoehorned into it. There's nothing kind of forced about it. She's just created this world where there's an academy of mages who are all men, and she's written about it from her perspective. So it's not like there's any kind of one way it can go. It's always going to be varied and it's always going to be diverse, no matter where you come from. But it's about experiencing those voices, those different writers' voices. I think is what's important.
Well, I have had her on my reading list for so long now that I think now certainly when I finish my current read, I will put her quite high on the list of the next things to read. And I'll make it. Do you think if I had to pick one, because I'm not going to lie to you, my reading list is pretty long at the minute, even with lockdown. If I had to put a science fiction, Left Hand of Darkness, or Earthsea in as the novel that I read, which one?
Ooh.
I can only pick one. I probably only have time to shoehorn one in right now.
I would read the first Earthsea book.
Right. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
I'll do that then.
It's short. It won't take you very long to get through. It's very compelling. She sets up a lot of themes that carry through to the later books.
Okay. Well, I've said it here now. I'll get onto that and we can talk about the plot and characters more when I've read it. That'll be fun. I'll enjoy that. It's like a book club. That's nice.
Yeah, I think so. Let's do something like that. Guys, listeners, if you want to join in this book club, get on the Discord chat that we've got set up. We'll put a link around here somewhere for you to click on, or if you're on Instagram, message us and we'll send you an invite to it. Get on the Discord and let's talk about some books.
Yeah, let's. And for anyone listening to this now, if you want to go in, if you haven't read Earthsea like me, come on the journey together. Let's read it and we, comments, thoughts, whatever, share them on the Discord, Instagram. Let's talk about it, and then. And having read it, you'll get more out of the discussion when we talk about it later. So that's all good. So, and then hopefully maybe by then we can get people to call in or text in or whatever with their thoughts and stuff as well, and we can talk about other people's opinions online too. So
that certainly is the plan. Listeners, we want to have you call in and talk to us live on the air. That would be great. What other books have you finished recently, mate? You want to talk about?
So going back to something that I mentioned before, I picked up the D&D 5th version of the campaign for Neverland, obviously based on Peter Pan. When I purchased that, I decided to correct an error that had been long standing out, that I had never experienced Peter Pan. Never in a movie, in a book, or anything. I haven't watched the Disney, I haven't seen a play, I haven't seen Hook with Robin Williams, any of that. I was vaguely familiar through cultural osmosis of the story and the characters, but I was not intimately familiar with the plot. So what I decided to do is go back to the original and find a collected works of Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, which talks a little bit about his life and then talks about the first incarnation of Peter Pan in I believe it was 1902 or 1903. Peter Pan appeared as a character in a story called The Little White Bird, which was kind of a fairy tale for children set in Kensington Gardens in London, obviously just, Edwardian London. And then there was a play written in 1903, just called A Play, which was the very first stage incarnation of Peter Pan. Wendy and Peter and the Lost Boys and Captain Hook, etc. So I've been reading these original incarnations, and they've been really eye-opening because I'm still reading through it. It's interesting to see that it then became a novel in 1911 called Peter and Wendy, and then it went on to be a stage play that we know nowadays in 1928, and then has been adapted various times by other people. But I really wanted to go back to the genesis of this kind of iconic Disney fantasy character of Peter Pan. And there's some really interesting little nuggets of cultural and kind of folkloric stuff tied up with it. I guess I'd never put together the idea he's called Peter Pan, as in the god Pan. This wild satyr-esque faun style character, for those not aware of the god Pan, Bacchus and wine and wild abandon and all this kind of stuff. And there had been a Victorian quite a common literary device to include pan or kind of pan-like characters or influences in certain novels, all the way from super overt things like Arthur Macken's the great face of the great god Pan, and various other things. And I didn't realize that there is a satyr in The Wind and the Willows, which is really weird. That charming idyllic countryside stories we know so well, Toad of Toad Hall, etc. There is one point where they're looking for a character and they find him washed up next to some guy with hooved horns and playing a pipe and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, whoa. Okay, so there's this little kind of literary device that was running through kind of Victorian and literature, and J.M. Barrie takes this concept and talks about fairies and lost babies who become birds and who are brought up by birds, and there's also this Victorian fascination of that kind of children who were born in the wilderness and raised by wolves and all this kind of stuff, and Darwinism and learning about culture and nature and nurture and all this kind of stuff, and all that's wrapped up in Peter Pan, and it makes for the original play in 1903 makes for some quite disturbing and a bit weird reading, actually. I thought going into it I would be an adult reading a kind of childish play or a childish story. But actually when I scratched the surface, that kind of Disney sparkle soon gave way to a dark underbelly of kind of adult fiction about young boys and girls. And I don't think I'm kind of playing it up to be anything that it isn't. I think anyone who wants to go and read the originals will find this, especially from a modern perspective, this quite disturbing narrative about the way that young people look at each other and the way the adults look at them as well. And I think it was really tough. It's really tough to get my head around, and to understand that this was the genesis of something that we see as so innocent with Peter Pan and then later into Hook and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really much darker than I was expecting it to be. Wow.
So would you say it draws on those ancient like folkloric touchstones that are kind of very typical of like Western fantasy still? Is there a lot of things that I'd recognise?
So I would like to think that I'm fairly well read in terms of esoterica and kind of I've read The Golden Bough and I've read some Greek myths and all of this kind of stuff. In some weirder fiction, not fiction, but some other books. I don't see a lot of overt esoterica or occult knowledge in the play, or in The Little White Bird. But what I do get is this idea that J.M. Barrie was drawing on a cultural kind of font of interest in the dark and the macabre. In a way, and yeah, it was really weird because it's not what I expected, and I just keep going back to the fact that I've overlooked the idea that he's called Peter Pan, and it's not purely for alliteration, and if it is, the important bit is Pan, not Peter. So it made me look at the novel in a very different way. It's this boy raised by birds. And
he's immortal?
Well, yeah, he's immortal, and he kind of flies in through children's windows and watches them through the window at night, and doesn't have a mother, and he has a lot of female characters kind of fawning after him, and kind of wanting to be his girlfriend, and all he wants is a mother. It's very Freudian. There's a lot of unconscious stuff going on there, and it surprised me to read how popular this play was in the years when it was released, and the following years it became the thing where people would take their children to see it year after year, and it's pantomime-esque, and it's really quite the basic narrative of it all is pretty dark, and it made me a little, I'm not gonna lie, it made me a little uncomfortable. The entire thing made me a little bit uncomfortable, and it takes quite a lot to make me uncomfortable reading or watching something. So.
Yeah, for sure. And you said the novel was written in 1928? The
novelization of the play, the first novelization was called Peter and Wendy, and that was released in 1911. The stage play as we know it, was kind of kind of rounded off and revised in 1928. And it is Peter Pan. The play that became Peter Pan was released about 25 years before that, in about 1903, 1904. And that's the version that I've just finished reading. And the character of Peter Pan first appeared in The Little White Bird, which was a long story about a young boy's adventures through Kensington Park Gardens, which is very kind of fantasy and fairies and all this kind of stuff. And Peter Pan is a major character in certain chapters of that book, and then he's developed into the kind of full main character of the play, and then obviously the novels that follow. But I didn't realize the heritage that this character had gone through, and the kind of the very, very quite bizarre circumstances around the first version of the play. I think it's very difficult for anyone to read it now and just think that it's very innocent, and it really doesn't appear that way to me. And I'm not doing this kind of brass eye way of kind of, there are paedophiles around every corner and everything like that. I realize that there are awful people out there and there's awful things, and we have a modern perspective of crime and of all of this kind of stuff. That and I'm also aware that as we go further back in history, there were also horrible people, and horrible things that exist, and maybe we didn't talk about them. It's a cultural aspect. But still, all of that aside, I can't reconcile the idea in my mind that this wasn't perceived as something a bit odd, even back then. How it's managed to kind of become, Disney Peter Pan, the kind of thing that you show your kids. I mean, even if you just think about the concept, it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, I mean,
the boy who doesn't grow up.
That's I'm creeped out now as well, I'll be honest. But so how much of it is how much of the elements of the story that we know did Disney add in? Is there a Captain Hook in the novel? Is there a crocodile?
Now I am partway through my Peter Pan Odyssey, if you will.
Okay, all right.
So my Neverland journey, I'm kind of halfway through it. So I haven't yet to watch the Disney version, because I'm doing it all in chronological order. So I want to see what's been added later. Yeah. But I can certainly say that from the original play, there is indeed a Captain Hook. There is a crocodile. There are pirates. The Captain Hook has had his hand bitten off by the crocodile, which makes them mortal enemies. He hates Peter Pan. He wants to kind of steal the Lost Boys. I think there's this idea of generation there as well. Hook is the grown up, and the pirates are the grown ups, and Peter Pan they are the children. So it's this timeless rebellion story wrapped up in this as well. The children want their freedom and their imagination, whereas the older people, being the pirates, want to almost cage them into reality. So I think there's a lot of that going on. But even the character of Captain Hook is really deeply unpleasant. His hatred for Peter and the other boys, and his lording over the pirates, and it's very it's very weird. It's very dark, and I feel like I've discovered some weird Victorian Edwardian bizarre story that no one's ever heard of, but I haven't. It's Peter Pan. It's like, it's so mainstream, it's unreal.
Right, yeah. Is there magic in Neverland, or is it just him that's a magic being, or is magic abound elsewhere as well?
Do you know what? It's definitely a fantasy world, and I'm guessing it's meant to be like a dream world or whatever. They get there by flying, because Peter takes Wendy and her little brothers out through the window and takes them to Neverland, where the other Lost Boys live, who are boys who've been kind of pretty much fell out of their strollers or whatever in the park, and the women have just ignored them, so that they're essentially lost babies, forgotten by the side of the road, which is a strange enough concept in itself.
As you do, yeah.
And the constant reiteration of the desire for a mother figure really got me thinking about kind of what's the psychology behind this? What's he trying to say? Is that the kind of every man really yearns for a mother? Because I mean that's super Freudian, and Peter's relationship with the female characters in the play, namely the character who becomes Tinkerbell in the later iteration, and Wendy and Tiger Lily, who is the female leader of the Red Indians who live in Neverland. They all desire Peter Pan, and they all want him to be, their boyfriend, for want of a better term. But Peter can only see the other women in terms of mothers. Will you be my mother? Will you be my mother? And this constant repeating of this is like, whoa, they want to kiss Peter, and Peter's like, I just want you to put me to bed and tuck me up. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's really weird. I didn't think it was as weird as it was until I read it. I kind of thought that I might be having to kind of look deeper into it to find something weird, but instead what I've done is read something that has really kind of freaked me out a little bit.
It's like overtly weird, like more weirder than you.
Yeah, like super weird. Like how did people sit and watch this and think this was okay? Like that's my thing. So yeah, well, I'll update you on the journey, and when I watch the Disney one and the 1928 version, apparently there was a Hollywood version in the 30s. And interestingly, Peter Pan as a copyright is out of copyright, so people are free to use Neverland and all of those concepts in any sort of creative endeavor without the need to pay any copyright fees.
Wow, he's a public domain now, is he?
It is public domain. G.M. Barrie, the author, gifted the rights to the stage play to the Children's Hospital, Great Ormond Street, in 1929, which was lovely. So they will get royalties from any official adaptation of the stage play, or any theatre who wants to do it, or any big movie that actually takes the original story. But it's out of copyright, so you can include a spin-off story or a prequel or a sequel or whatever, and it's totally out of copyright. So
wow. Let's build on the Peter Pan canon.
Well, that's it. And I don't know, and I haven't looked into it enough to find out what spin-off fan fiction or real fiction there is about Peter. I think there is some. I think there's been some published fiction based around those characters, but as I say, I'm at the beginning of this odyssey at the minute, so I'm. It all began with this Neverland 5th edition role-playing supplement, and I thought, I can't really appreciate that without going back to the original material. And I think if I was to run a D&D 5th game based on the original early 1900s material, that would not be a fun game. So.
Or a very fun one, depending on the
or a very World of Darkness game anyway.
Well, mate, fair play for doing your research and going back through time to find out where this originated from, because it would be very easy to just bash the Disney film on and then go, oh, right, Captain Hook, and then you just run an innocent game, which, to be honest, an hour ago when we were talking about Neverland was my view of it, and you've just blown my mind a little bit there. That's pretty creepy.
There you go.
If you want to contribute to the canon of Peter Pan and Neverland, join our Discord server.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be some subtext going on there in terms of the whole Freudian thing. He must have had something he was trying to say.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna read all the original material, and then I'm going to start reading about his life and get some context, and then I'm going to read books written about those books to see if I can and get deeper into this and see what other people may have critiqued it, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to have had these thoughts about it, so I'm sure there's a body of work out there that has decided to review Peter Pan in light of certain values, etc. So yeah, I'll continue down in this rabbit hole, and I'll let you know what I discover.
Wow, British folklore, eh? It just goes all kinds of places.
Yeah,
that is fascinating. I look forward to hearing more about that, man. Thank you for bringing that to the table. I think it's about time for us to close off with our music section now. What do you think?
100%. Yeah, bring it to me. What have you brought?
Okay. I've been listening to a lot of metal. Of course, that's my go-to. I was stuck between a few various bands, but I've decided I wanted to introduce you to a Bristolian 3-piece hardcore and post-rock act called Svalbard.
Okay.
They are a little bit kind of, it's like black metal and post-rock mixed with this kind of hardcore attitude. The album that I've been listening to is called When I Die, Will I Get Better? It was released last year on Church Road Records, which is a relatively new label. It kind of sounds like, do you know Rolo Tomasi?
Yeah.
Right, it's that kind of vibe. It's energetic,
Okay, cool.
really kind of dynamic, heavy riffs. There's a lot of brutal double kick bass drums, but they've also got this kind of ghostly vocals and wispy guitar sounds as well. And there's two singers. One is male and one is female, and I think they do a good job of kind of balancing each other out. Now, what made me decide on this band over some of the other stuff I've been listening to recently is this album in particular, When I Die, Will I Get Better, has a lot of social themes running through its lyrics that I think are quite relevant to our current situation at the moment with everything that's been going on. I'm sure it'll be relevant to our listeners as well, if you're in similar situations to ourselves, kind of struggling with day-to-day life and mental health and that kind of thing. The lyrics are written by the lead guitarist, a woman by the name of Serena Cherry. They address a lot of things like mental illness and mental health. Those are kind of prevalent themes running through the lyrics. There's a song about a Labour MP being discriminated for the dress that she wore to Parliament one time, so that was enough to inspire this woman to write a song about that. There's a song about domestic violence and domestic abuse and that kind of thing. So she picks these subjects one at a time and she tackles them through the lyrics and through the energy of this music, man. It's really fascinating. There is one song about how the press portrays women in music, which I thought was quite interesting. And the song that I've picked to end the episode on is about how dating apps are dehumanizing, which I thought was a pretty
wow, yeah.
It's a real modern subject matter to write lyrics about. This album came out in 2020 last year, so it's real up to date. It's real something that I can connect with. I find a lot of metal that I listen to is about stuff that seems far away, like fantasy landscapes, or it's Sabbath from fucking 50 years ago or whatever. So it's nice to have a metal act from the UK.
Is this their first long play? Is this their first record?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think so. I think they had some previous releases with Holy Roar.
Right. Okay.
Let me just have a look. I think they put out some stuff with Holy Roar a few years ago. Yes, they had 2 albums before.
Okay,
So
cool. So this is their
their
most
third
recent album.
Yes. And Holy Roar Records, who released, I think, Gallows, and I think Rolo Tomasi was with them as well. That record label kind of fell apart because the manager got accused of some quite serious sexual misconduct. So all those bands kind of parted ways, and Church Road Records was kind of founded in the wake of that, with all the music managers going off to do their own thing. So it's sort of like even the label itself is born out of these happenings and these incidents.
Cool.
It's really fascinating, man, and the lyrics are really interesting. And the lead guitarist, Serena Cherry, plays 40k, so she's one of us. She's got an army of Space Wolves.
Nice.
Yeah. I was reading an article about the band, and she was wearing a Tabletop Tactics t-shirt, and I was like, why has she got this t-shirt on? So I had to do a bit of investigating. But yeah, she's a 40k player, and she's a wargamer. So yeah, I don't want to get too deep into fanboy territory there, but it's a pretty cool band, man. They're from Bristol. The music scene down in Bristol is pretty heavy.
Sweet. Yeah. Are they on Spotify?
They are on Spotify.
I'll check them out. I'll check them out on Spotify.
Svalbard. Do check them out. I think we will round off the episode there, mate. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's good. First episode back after Christmas. We've got a lot more to do, so they'll be coming with regular frequency after this. So giving you a little bit of a Christmas New Year break, but 2021 we're going to be with you, coming back to you with regular episodes, and we're going to start to build a little community in Discord and Instagram and stuff, and that's where we want to start talking to people. So yeah, it's good. It's a new, we've done a few things before Christmas, but I think this is the the real big start of it, isn't it?
Lovely. Yeah, I hope so. I'm really excited to see where we can take this and what comes from it. And I've got a list of subject matter to bring up, and it just keeps getting longer. I've honestly got so much to talk about. I don't know if we're going to be able to make enough episodes to fit all the things in that I want to discuss on the air. So I'm very excited.
Cool. Me too.
Very excited. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Really do appreciate that. Appreciate your time. I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. I hope you're thoroughly freaked out as I am about the fact that Peter Pan is not the innocent story that we thought it was. If you've got anything that you want to talk to us about, any comments or suggestions, anything you want to hear us discuss, get at us at the Instagram, which is at Human Energy Field Podcast. We also have a Discord. I've put the link to the Discord in my Instagram bio, so you can go to my Instagram, Gamma Valley, and just click on the link straight in the bio, and that'll take you over to the Discord. You can join in there. Things are still getting up off the ground, but we're hoping that we can interact with people directly, because I love a bit of that. I love a bit of talking to strangers and talking about books like this. It's always fun. So without any further ado, I'm hoping I can get a song on the end of this episode. Let's hope Spotify cooperates with us. Guys, thank you for listening. Stay hydrated, stay safe, look after yourselves. This song is The Currency of Beauty by Svalbard. Good night, mate.
All right.